Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, yeah, there he is. Okay, so I'm going to talk today, this afternoon, about my other hobby, my other teaching hobby, which is this course that we mentioned earlier called How We Know What We Know. And the origins of this course were that the university, Florida International University, decided that it wanted to try to own the idea of internationalizing the curriculum. So they put out a call for courses, completely new courses, not overhauled courses, but completely new courses with new concepts and new content, and in a competition in which there was a cash incentive for it, and a pretty handsome one. So I put a proposal in, and along with about 37 other faculty, and there were several stipulations. One was it had to be team taught, and it had to be team taught with a discipline outside of your own, and that the course had to meet three global learning objectives, learning outcomes, and then three core curriculum outcomes, and then three university outcomes. So there were a total of 9 outcomes that had to be met by these courses. So this was sort of an extreme mapping strategy to figure out how all this would work. So I got together with a research librarian, and we put together a class that we always wanted was a sort of a dream class kind of for us. And so we put this class together, and it essentially has about 50% of it is really news literacy, and about 50% of it is global information literacy. So the class was launched. It was the first one that was adopted, and it was launched, and immediately gathered somewhat of a cult following on campus. So to this day, when the class is offered in spring semester and in the first summer, when registration opens a year before, it usually closes in 48 hours with 120 students. So the class is extremely popular, probably the most popular class in the undergraduate core. And it was placed in the humanities under the Florida humanities curriculum, which made it a writing component. It had a writing component in it, and X number of writing assignments have to be evaluated for each student. So anyway, we got the class going, and we have now morphed it in a number of ways. But one thing I want to talk about today was this past semester, I was asked to, for some reason, the College of Business decided to put this course as a requirement in a dual degree program with Dominican Republic students, which is 40 Dominican Republic students come to campus every fall and finish out their bachelor's degree, and they are awarded a degree from FIU and in the Dominican Republic. So for some reason, without asking anyone, the College of Business put it in as a requirement. And then they realized they did not know how to teach it. So they called my boss and said, could we buy his contract out to teach these 40 Dominican Republic students? She had never heard of anything such as buying out anything. She didn't know we had anything valuable enough to buy out. So she came to me and said, well, they want to buy you out. And I said, well, okay. She said, well, should I do this? And I said, yeah, you should do it. And she said, why? And I said, well, you can take the money that they're going to pay you, my salary, and hire like 6 adjuncts, and then I can go do something fun, which was the deal. And so I went over and I taught these Dominican students. There were 40 of them. And in the middle of the semester then, the Global Learning Office called and said, we have an idea for your class. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, we want to do a co-curricular arrangement with another university and a class in another university real time. So that your class meets with their class on an issue. And I said, okay, where? And they said, pick a country. I said, well, that's ridiculous. You tell me where we have arrangements. And they said, look, we have arrangements in so many places, it's likely we're going to have it. Well, Chavez was dying in Cuba at the time. So I said, what about Venezuela? We have a partner school there. So we set up, and these are all business students that I have, undergraduates, so we set up this dual classroom thing with my undergraduates and an MBA class in Caracas. And we set it up, they set the date, and the date was 2 days after Chavez died. So of course they closed all the universities, and we couldn't have the conversation, we couldn't have the class, which by the way is 3 hours long. So we thought we had all the technology set up and all that. So we then rescheduled it for 2 weeks later. We actually pulled it off. And how we set it up is that for the first third of the class, both of the classes were required to go on websites, news websites from the other countries, websites from the other country, and learn as much as they could about current events and the background of the country. So you had the Dominican Republic and you had Venezuela. Two countries that have a fairly warm relationship, basically over an oil deal. You all know about the oil deals that Chavez had in Latin America. Well, the Dominican had a very sweet one. And so using the website, and I don't know how many of you use this, Kiosco. Does anybody use Kiosco? Anybody heard of it? Kiosco.net? I highly recommend this site because it has an unbelievable number of newspapers from all over the world by region and everything on a daily basis. So the classes in Venezuela and Caracas in my class used Kiosco and then researched, and the idea was find out as much as you could about the other country and then have the students try to figure out what's really true and credible about what's going on in the other country. Needless to say, this thing took off, and I have to tell you, the concept that we had, that I had with the professors, was that we would actually try to do information through what we're calling a back door there, that our students were trying to find that out. Well, some of the results of this were, on the death of Chavez, for instance, the Venezuelan students challenged my students about their version of what happened with Chavez. And they said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, how do you know that he died in Venezuela? They said, well, we read it in the New York Times. And the Venezuelan students said, we don't know that. Nobody in Venezuela knows that he died here. That's what the government said. There's no evidence that that plane landed here. There's no evidence that that plane carried his body, if there was a plane, and there's no evidence that he died here at all. All we know about is, or we're sure of, is that he died because we do have a corpse, and we have seen the corpse. But we don't know where he was, we don't know, all we have is the government's information. Where did your information come from? My students said the New York Times. They said, well, guess what? The version in the New York Times is the same one that we have in Venezuela. You don't know anything that we don't know. So the point is, and then they got into the discussion about, well, what happens to the oil? You know, the Venezuelan student said, well, what do we get for your oil? And they said, rice and beans. And he said, come on, that's ridiculous. That's a terrible answer. You're not getting rice and beans. There's not enough rice and beans in the world for the amount of oil that we give you. So what do you get? What are you getting out of this? And the student said, well, we don't know because we pay $7.50 a gallon for our gasoline. The Venezuelan student said, how could that be? You get it almost free. So as you can see, that's just a couple of examples of what went on for 3 hours between these, among these students from these two countries in these two classes. So a lot of other things happen in this Dominican class, and I'd be willing to share some of those with you too, but I just wanted to highlight that one as sort of an experiment that the university took on, and I think we're going to do it again. So thank you.